Alright, I'm going to start on trace paper with a couple of markers. I have a variety of different types of markers, Pro Marker and Touch. There's also Copic. These are a little bit more expensive. I think they're between $5 to $6 a piece, but I really only use like 5 or 6 of them and they last a pretty long time. They come with two sides. One is a really thick chiseled edge where you can make big marks on the page, and the other is a fine point side where you can draw finer lines and throw in some details. It's more like a brush side. So when it comes to drawing with these on sketch paper, I find they make a really nice effect. So one thing you can do is just make in like a nice big broad plane of color. Or if you want to create patterns, you can use the fine side to do that. You can also add planes of color on top, and you can see they kind of blend in. You just experiment with the different types of lines that you can create with these markers, using the different edges and seeing how they run across the page. I'm not really thinking about these marks in terms of what they could create. I'm just testing out what the capabilities of the marker are. So you can see how when I add the dark blue over top of the earthy henna color, how it begins to bleed into the other color. I think that the properties of these markers, they're alcohol based, so they kind of like do blend a little bit into each other. But I think that there's like a lot of cool textures that you could make with these. So play around with those, and if you're interested in what you could make with these broad planes of colors and different patterns, I think those could be used for rock strata, soil, planting, really just almost anything that you can imagine for landscape. Another thing you can do with them is if you were thinking like, I want to create some trees, I'm going to go over here. Creating your own sort of tree elevations. You could use the markers to fill in an area and then use a Sharpie to go over top of it. Once you let this dry, if you use a Sharpie, it shouldn't bleed into it. Whereas if you use a technical pen, sometimes they bleed into the alcohol. So recommend using a Sharpie. You could use those as assets in the back of one of your drawings. So you can combine media with these markers. Okay. Let's put the trace paper aside for a second and go to one of these other types of paper. Alright, I wanted to show you this yupo paper with the markers as well, so I've just grabbed a few different colors here, just so you can see the difference between how it looks on tracing paper and how it looks on this yupo. You can see that the paper doesn't really absorb the ink as much as it did on the tracing paper, so you have a little bit more control over the texture that you're seeing. It doesn't blend the same way that it does on the tracing paper, but you can see that you can almost scrub out what was there before. So it doesn't really blend, it just kind of goes and layers over top. You could create some scrubby textures. What I'm doing right here with these different layers, I think could be some kind of a wall texture. We'll go in with little flecks. Maybe there's a few seams, different materials. So you could draw in any kind of dimension with these markers. You could draw in section, you can draw in plan, you could draw in elevation if you want to create some trees. This paper, it's really interesting, and as you see, it kind of has this plasticky finish, so I think this would scan really well and kind of really maintain the vibrancy of the colors as you scan it in.